Underwriting for the Money Doctor Show is provided by Regari Real Estate, Federal Street, Greenfield, a third-generation real estate agency serving the Pioneer Valley. Ryan and Casey Liquors, Main Street, Greenfield, exploring the world one glass at a time. West County Equipment Rental of Shelburne, daily, weekly, monthly rentals, 625-6463, or on the web at westcountyequipment.com. The Franklin County Community Development Corporation, growing sustainable businesses and communities since 1979. www.fccdc.org. Weld Communications, Marketing and Publicity, helping businesses spread the word in the Pioneer Valley and beyond. www.weldwords.com.
There's a better life if I could be debt-free, but all my money is a mystery. I was feeling overwhelmed and it was wearing thin when I knocked on the door and heard the doctor's in. Oh, the doctor's in, the doctor's in. She got the right prescription to help you win. Oh, the doctor's in, the money doctor's in.
Hello and welcome to the Money Doctor Show. I'm Dr. Frances Rahaim, president of Power Down Debt, and my guest today is Chris Collins, who's also my executive producer. I should say that it is as a disclaimer. But I've asked him to be here with me as a guest because he has, well, I'm going to say recently, undergone a large medical trauma and all of the expense that goes with that, and finally is now weeding through that. And you know, there's a lot of medical expense problems that really plague people, and it's not the medical part. The medical part you can deal with. It's all the aftermath that's difficult. So first of all, thank you for being brave enough and honest enough to come and do this because it's personal.
I'm not sure if weeding through is as good as much as being in the weeds still, but you're helping me negotiate or navigate my way out of the weeds, and I'll forever be grateful for that.
Well, thank you. You're pretty easy to work with. So I know that you don't even want to talk about.
No, I've told the story before, and it's been in the newspaper. But I think it's important to reset it because the thing about life is you never know what's going to happen. And up until March of 2011, I was on a pretty fast career track. I was working full-time in radio. I had a morning talk show. I was doing a bunch of different things. I was writing a column in the paper. I had a lot of different professional irons in the fire. You and I were doing a lot of work together on segments for WHMP. And I knew my health wasn't optimal, but I didn't think I was heading for the fall that I thought. I had had a serious problem the previous couple of years with bad bouts of kidney stones. And if anybody who's ever had kidney stones or kidney issues, I can tell you that there are a few things that are more painful in the world. And I used to pass these things, like, not to too graphic, like crazy. And oftentimes at work, ironically enough.
I remember you having a kidney stone attack in my office one day.
I did.
You looked awful.
It's people who have had them and have given birth to children say that childbirth is actually less painful than dealing with kidney stone ailments. So I knew there was something off. So I guess the rubber hit the road in the third week in March of 2011 when I sustained probably the worst kidney stone attack I'd ever had while again at work. And I had to go to the ER. And 2 years prior, I had the same problem. I had a stone that was so large it blocked my ureter and caused my kidney to fail. So that was 2 years prior. This was as bad or worse because there was no move in the thing, and I was admitted to the hospital with kidney failure. They had to do a whole bunch of things. I'm not going to get into what they had to do. My kidneys started working again. It wasn't pleasant. It was brutal. So it was pretty obvious I was out of the game. So luckily I worked for a company that offered me the benefit of a short-term disability option, and they said, look, you got to get yourself fixed up. At that point I figured 6 months I'll be back, short-term disability. You know, and 60% of my pay, non-tax, which we'll get to later.
Right.
So I end up in the hospital with kidney failure, and I end up on the bench, so to speak. I can't work, and there's all kinds of rules about that, which drove me crazy because you know me, I want to be go, go, go.
Right.
As things progressed, I was working through the kidney stuff. I was on a series of drugs to make the kidney stones go away. The stones shrank, and then around the middle of July, I had to have renal stents that were implanted, taken out. I began to develop massive edema, which is water retention.
Bloating, right? Yeah.
And I began to bloat to the point where I couldn't function. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't walk.
Right.
So I went into the ER in mid-July, late July of 2011. That was the last thing I remember, was being wheeled into the Franklin ER. And I woke up after a 3-week coma. And during the course of the coma, I'm told a lot of things happened I don't remember. I had a lot of dreams when I was under the anesthesia, because I was literally on drugs to keep me alive. I coded 3 times, I died 3 times and came back. A lot of things happened that are described to me after the fact that I didn't even know about. So I ended up at Bay State in Springfield, and then they did some cardiac tests and found that I had major blockage, so I had to have a bypass at the end of August. So all of these things are happening, and at the time, you're not thinking about finances. Although I was worried about everything. But the financial boom hit after, and we can go into that. But basically, long and short, as I ended up in the hospital for 10 weeks, I got out at September 13th, came home, and spent the better part of 8 or 9 months rehabbing and taking a lot of stock of things, and finding that there's a lot of financial pitfalls to getting sick that you want to avoid. And I'm still paying that price and learning that lesson every day now.
You know, it's interesting because I'm hoping that I'm not so financially wired that all I heard in your story was dollars, 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 because you and I have been through this, and I feel awful for the health problems you've had, and you've clawed your way back. But every time you mentioned one of those things, I had to take a lot of medications. Then I had to have stents put in. Then I was in a coma. And you blew by the coma, because for you, it was totally gone. But you said, oh yeah, and I was in a coma, because you don't have anything else you can say about it. You don't remember it, but that's 3 weeks of medical care without your input just being done.
Yeah.
And then, you know, coming out and going through physical rehab, physical therapy and all of that, that is all expensive.
Yeah.
And you're a guy who, it sounds on the surface, had it pretty good.
Yeah.
You had short-term disability. You had
lucky.
health insurance. Yeah, that's lucky. Most people don't have short-term disability or health insurance. Well, not most people, but many people don't have health insurance. So, you know, you were a man who was employed, had this problem, and had those benefits. And you do have medical bills, as we know. Mm-hmm. And we've been able to make payment arrangements, and everybody's, you're very conscientious about that. You definitely want to pay the people who saved your life. You have never made any bones about that. But imagine for a moment that you weren't employed with short-term disability. I mean, the unemployment rate is enormous right now.
Yes.
When people lose jobs, they often lose health insurance.
Yep.
And we can say COBRA all we want. You know, we can have COBRA for 18 months. You
yeah,
have
it's a
to,
COBRA because it bites you.
Yeah, you have to pay the full premium. It's very expensive, and many people can't afford it.
Well, the lucky thing with me was my health insurance was not through my employer. My wife has a very good benefit plan, and it's a family plan. So knock wood, I had her benefits, and that's a PPO, and it was and they were great. I mean, they covered, I would say, conservatively estimating between everything, if I had not had that PPO plan, my medical, whatever you want to call it, problem would have cost me out of pocket about $300,000.
Yeah.
Between the heart surgery, between all the other parts of it.
Right, so a $300,000 malady, and PPO, which is Preferred Provider Organization, covered a lot of that. Now, one thing we should say about PPOs is they cover a lot of it if you go to the doctors within the PPO, and you are able to have care outside, but then they cover it at a different rate. So there may be times where, even though you have great coverage under a PPO, you might have something where you need a specialist who isn't inside that PPO's approved, on that approved provider list, and that may cause the cost to skyrocket a little bit as well.
I don't know how many specialists I had. I had a ton of them, and I'm still seeing those guys on a regular basis. Some of them, and those people saved my life. I mean, I can't say enough about the care I got at Bay State, the nurses especially. I mean, and I have a soft spot and new appreciation for the people that work in those jobs, because you don't know until you're on that gurney what they really do, and it's amazing.
When they say your life is in their hands, we're not kidding.
Literally.
Your life is literally in their hands. Somebody makes a mistake, it's over. Okay. Without going into any personal details or anything, you were in a coma.
Yeah.
You had no idea what was going on.
No, I was all over the place, but I wasn't anywhere present.
I received a call from your wife.
Yes.
And helped her as much as I could help her, but that was a wake-up call, because you were the guy who did everything. You paid those bills. You paid attention to your own stuff, and you, through no fault of your own, were suddenly inaccessible.
Yeah, that was a mistake on my part. It's a common mistake, I think, and it's not a chauvinistic thing. I think my wife and I have always had sort of a deal where she doesn't want to be in charge of the money. She wants me to do it, but she wants to know what's going on. And we communicate, but I don't think I gave her enough of a rundown. And luckily for me, I was enrolled in a plan that had a setup where I could pay bills automatically, because when I was out, I wasn't writing checks. I wasn't, able to get to the bank. Luckily, this short-term disability was a direct deposit. But I'll tell a funny story when I have a little more time in the second segment about how, not really funny, but it's funny now. It wasn't funny at the time. But she was having to deal with seeing me literally moments from death on many occasions. I mean, when I say I was close to dying, it was a matter of hours. It was, she got a call at work saying, "Get down here now. He's not going to last through the day." She said, she called all my family members. I mean, talk about a rock. I didn't think up until this happened that my wife was tougher than me. I thought I was the toughest monkey in the cage, but she showed me something that I'll never be able to forget or repay. And so, but it taught me a lesson. You can never know for sure, and you have to make sure both partners in a relationship know where everything is and how it all works, because otherwise you end up in big trouble.
Yeah, it's a lot of times when I see people who are having financial difficulties, it's almost always wrapped around some sort of emotional problem. When you are looking at your husband in a coma, you don't care what's happening. If you need medication and you're on a fixed income, you put it on a credit card.
That's right.
You do what you've got to do to get it done. And then later on you have to try and deal with it, but that's how we do it. We can only manage so much at the time that we're managing it.
Well, I had to do that. When I got out, I needed to get all these medications. I'm on 10 or 11 different prescriptions still.
Right.
So I had to go, and I went and I got a zero interest credit card offer from a national credit card company. I didn't want to do that, and it's the balance is now $2,100, and that's all copays and medicines, because I couldn't afford to pay out of pocket.
Right. And I remember us talking about this and saying, I mean, you were upset about it.
I hate doing that.
I know you do, but it's manageable. It's manageable. But it is, I find not just medical problems, but all kinds of problems like that. When we are emotionally distraught, there is no doubt about it, finance takes a back seat. And so, yeah, it helps if you have some sort of plan in place. Autopilot helps a lot. Your payments were made automatically. And because of that, your wife was able to she was able to tread water.
She didn't have to think about it.
Yeah.
And that was tremendously helpful. And it's helpful for me too, because I don't have to think about it. I just got to make sure the money is there to cover it.
I don't want to make this about statistics or anything, but I can't close this segment, and you are nowhere near it, but I can't close this segment without saying that 62%, according to Harvard University study, of personal bankruptcies come from medical expenses. And of that, an interesting, I think it was 78% of people who have had cancer, 78% of those who have all these medical problems have health insurance in place. So when we come back, I want to talk more about health insurance and medical bills and what you do to manage them going forward, and what we can maybe do better here, I hope, when we return.
Underwriting for the Money Doctor Show is provided by Regari Real Estate, Federal Street, Greenfield, a third-generation real estate agency serving the Pioneer Valley. Ryan and Casey Liquors, Main Street, Greenfield. Exploring the world one glass at a time. West County Equipment Rental of Shelburne. Daily, weekly, monthly rentals. 625-6463 or on the web at westcountyequipment.com. The Franklin County Community Development Corporation. Growing sustainable businesses and communities since 1979. www.fccdc.org. Weld Communications, Marketing and Publicity. Helping businesses spread the word in the Pioneer Valley.
Hello and welcome back to The Money Doctor. My guest today is Chris Collins, returning with me to talk about a very personal issue, which actually was a medical malady and has piled up some medical debt. And we thought it would be a very important topic because there's so many people that suffer from this. So welcome back.
It's good to be back in so many ways.
It's good to be back. And it's nice to have you back in so many ways, from a coma and a pile of other, medical ailments. Before we went on break, we talked about, 62% of the bankruptcies, the personal bankruptcies filed in 2011 were from medical expenses, according to a Harvard University study. And what I found disturbing about that was that 78% of the people who file bankruptcy, estimated, may have already had health insurance, had some form of health insurance when that happened. So we tend to sort of skip through life, with this myth that says, I've got health insurance, I'm okay. Or all I have to do is pay the copay. But when something big hits you, like this hit you, how long were you in the hospital?
10 weeks.
10 weeks.
10 weeks.
Of hospital care, and then rehab.
But here's the thing about that, and it was my second stint in the hospital. One of the good things about my insurance is that there is an out-of-pocket deductible. It's not a good thing, but the bill that I have right now that I'm working to pay off was from the first stay with the kidney problem. So the second stay with the heart problem and the heart surgery and the coma and all that stuff, that was all. I didn't see a bill for a lot of that stuff because I had already passed my limit for the year that I pay out of pocket. So the insurance company covered almost 100% of all of that. So that was one lucky break.
Yes. But
the thing that people don't realize is that the post-care, every time I go to a cardiologist, it's $40. Well, also
your part of it is $40.
Right. It's $40 copay. But every cardiologist visit requires blood work, which the insurance company covers up to about $67, $68. So every time I go to the cardiologist, it's $108. Boom.
Yep. And how often do you have to go to the cardiologist?
Once every month, every 6 weeks.
Every 6 weeks, right.
So, but the problem with the blood work is that they're billed separately.
Right.
So you pay the copay at the doctor's office, but the blood work bill comes later. And if you miss one, and I've missed a couple of them, there's so many bills flying back and forth.
Right.
That you miss one, and if it doesn't get paid within a certain amount of time, boom, here comes a collection notice. 6 weeks after I got out of the hospital, I had to undergo what's called cardiac rehab, which is a program. It's usually about 32 weeks. And if you've ever had any kind of a cardiac issue, I highly recommend this program. It's at Franklin Medical Center. They're great people over there. Cheryl and the gang, they become your friends, they're buddies. And their job is to basically watch you exercise with electrodes on to make sure your heart rate is right and you're not overdoing it. And it's a way to indoctrinate yourself and rehab your cardiovascular system and develop what will hopefully be a lifetime of habits regarding exercise. And those, like I said, 32 weeks, 3 times a week, $40 a pop. By the time I got done, it was $1,200. That was the bill just for cardiac rehab. You tack that onto what we already owe for the hospital stay out of pocket, and you start adding up the copays, and now we're off to the races with $3,000, $4,000 in debt. I'm not underwater, but the water's right about here.
Right, you're treading it.
And I don't even like to say that word you said earlier in the show. I won't say it out loud.
The bankruptcy word.
See, I won't say that word.
I won't let you.
Because if I say that word, then it becomes a real possibility. And let me tell you something, there's nothing that I'm more scared of. The other thing I'm more scared of than a second heart surgery, I would say it's an even draw at this point, is the possibility of going bankrupt.
Wow. Well, I know in our opening show we touched on that with me. I had to file a bankruptcy when I was 23, and if you've never filed a bankruptcy, or if you've never known someone who has, and some people file it lightly, you know, I filed bankruptcy, I'll do it again 7 years. But for somebody who's wired like you, it really is emotionally difficult.
And by the way, one of the things I've been ordered to do by my doctor is avoid stress.
That's right.
Good luck with that when you're facing possible medical bankruptcy.
Well, and that,
see, I said the word. See, you made me say it.
You did, you said it, but it's not, I've got your back. I've got your back.
Glad somebody does.
First of all, if you had the kind of medical debt that I thought should be filed in bankruptcy, I mean, if that was really my point or my opinion, I would tell you. We'd sit and have a common conversation, and I'd say, you know what, you really need to do this to save yourself. But A, you don't want to do it, so my job is to help you reach your goals. And B, it's really not necessary. You're not, I mean, I know it feels awful to you, but you're not anywhere near. You're always much harder on yourself financially than you need to be. You're nowhere near that. We are able to make payment arrangements and pay them on time. But that I want to talk about. The way medical bills erode someone's savings. First, they go through whatever, you know, emergency cash reserves they have. And then they might put some stuff on some credit cards and try and get by. And then they start tapping their home equity line. And then they go to their kids' college education accounts. And when it's all tapped out. I don't have any of those, by the way. Just so you know. That's what happens to people. When that stuff's all tapped out, then they finally succumb and file bankruptcy. And there is a much better way to do it. So the way that I would suggest that you do it is you make payment arrangements with your creditors. You are proactive. You call them up, you say, listen, you saved my life. I want to pay you, but I have little to no income. So I need to make $10 a month payment arrangements. I need to do something to make these payment arrangements. Well, the problem when people do that on their own often is this. You're trying to create a plan without having all the pieces. You're playing chess when all you have is the pawns. And back there somewhere is a king and queen waiting to bill you. So you make optimistic, you know, positive thinking people make optimistic payment arrangements. So they say, I can pay $50 a month. And they begin to pay $50 a month. And then the more bills start coming in. You had a perfect example. You still have to pay your co-pays. You've got other stuff coming up. There could be, you know, some sort of medical costs in the future for more tests or whatever.
I hope not.
And I hope not too.
But you're right.
But it's possible. And if that happens, you now have strapped yourself with these payment arrangements because you wanted to be optimistic about it. So you have to be, as much as you want to make the highest payments you can make and get rid of the debt as quickly as you can, you have to err to the side of caution, in my opinion, and either have a professional who can help you get a picture on what all the bills are going to be, or just be conservative when you make these payment arrangements. You can always pay more later. You can always make higher payments, but scaling back is very difficult to do.
The tough part, I think, is when you get drop-kicked into collection.
Yeah.
And that to me has been, and I'm not saying it's no fault of my own, it's not that I haven't wanted to pay these things, but when you get a notice from a collection agency, it's like, okay, now we're looking at dinging my credit score, which makes me crazy, because it's not like I'm trying to blow these guys off.
Right.
It just hasn't been a situation where I've been able to put forward I mean, I've got to deal with the bills that are most important, which are the house bills.
Right.
And I mean, like I said, I'm not, and I probably shouldn't even be saying this out loud on TV, but I think it's important because I'm not the only one that dealt with this.
That's what all of our show's about. Yeah.
The thing that I've heard most from people that have read my story and heard my story is, geez, you know, it took a lot of courage to tell that story. Well, I didn't do it because, well, the main reason why I wanted the paper to do the piece that Bob Flaherty did on me was because there were so many rumors flying around. I'm still a quasi-public figure. People were running around saying, oh, he's brain dead in a nursing home. There were a lot of rumors that flew around while I was unable to defend myself in a coma. So I wanted to set the record straight. And the reason why I agreed to come on this show is because there's a reality here that I don't think anybody who's never been in this situation recognizes until they're in it.
Yes.
And so the better, you know, I'm not saying there's any way to necessarily prevent this, or, you know, no one knows when, you know, fate's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, by the way, you've got, you know, multiple organ failure on your horizon, deal with it. But you got to be prepared and get everything that you can squared away before the hammer falls, because you never know when it does.
Yeah, I agree. You brought up a really important point about credit scores getting dinged up.
Yes.
The old thinking, and it was accurate, was that medical bills couldn't harm your credit score. And so people just didn't pay them. They'd put medical bills on the last rung, and they got paid when they could. Unfortunately now, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, medical bills can now ding up your credit. And one of the problems I see in that is that you often don't know. Not just because you're in a coma, you don't know because the doctor's office is busy talking to the insurance company. The insurance company is busy not paying this. You're trapped in medical bureaucracy, and eventually, if you don't get the bill or you don't notice the bill, because all those bills come in looking the same. You'll say, I already paid this, I already paid that. It came from this healthcare center, it came from that doctor. They all look the same. And all you're busy doing is trying to get well. So, people try their best, but they often don't pay those bills. And when they're not paid, they get sent off to collections. And collections definitely can report to your credit reporting bureaus. Now, we've made calls to medical facilities and have heard things like, the doctor reports to your credit reporting bureau, but the medical facility doesn't, or vice versa. So again, you try to weed your way through that. So what do you do to protect yourself from this? And the answer is, first of all, you got to pull your credit report. Pull it fairly often, once a quarter, and take a look at it, and dispute any errors. Dispute any clerical errors for sure as soon as you notice them. If you get a bill in the mail and it says you owe $119 and you happen to notice that it hasn't been billed to your insurance or your insurance company didn't pay, get on the phone and call your doctor's office or call the healthcare provider that billed you and say, why wasn't this sent to my insurance? Or it was sent to your insurance, this is called recoding, it was sent to your insurance and they didn't pay it. And you get the bill, and you're a good doobie, and you say, I guess I owe this, my insurance didn't pay it. Not so fast. Call up the doctor's office or the healthcare provider and say, I noticed my insurance didn't pay this, but maybe it's the way it was coded. Now here, unfortunately, you're struggling. You're battling people in these jobs who do nothing but code numbers all day long, and they don't really want to. It's a rare person who really wants to do their job again and recode that thing and send it back out. But if you ask, they will likely do it. For instance, sometimes you might go to the doctor's office and they billed it to you as a typical office visit. And maybe that office visit isn't covered under your insurance. But they ran a test while they were there. Maybe they bill it as something else that they ran the test. It's got to be legit. But they recode it, send it back to your insurance company, and now your insurance company might pay it. If you have any organizational skills, start making a spreadsheet of what medical bills come in, because you will never keep track of them.
Oh, I know.
You just can't do it. It's almost impossible for somebody to keep track of the medical bills in a big illness like you've had. So, and a lot of times people will resort to a credit card, and now they're just paying it on the credit card, and they're not paying attention to those bills as they come in. So here's one thing that I wanted to talk about before we close out of this. Housing prices have continued to drop. What does that have to do with medical illnesses? We're house poor. We're home equity poor these days. And lots of people had credit lines available in case they had some sort of big emergency who don't have it anymore. So you really don't want to just sit there comfortably thinking, well, if anything really big happens, we have my house to fall back on, because it just isn't there any longer.
No, and I'm never going to do that again. I did that once before, and I'm not going to do it again.
Well, and I think a lot of people do. So in short, if you have a lot of medical bills and you're thinking about, what do I do? Fine, call a bankruptcy attorney and go and get some knowledge and just say, what will it really look like if I have to file bankruptcy? And then whether you like it or not, it doesn't matter. You got a consultation, you found out what the answers were, and then look for other debt help as well, and stack all of make an educated decision. Talk to a bankruptcy attorney, talk to a debt specialist, talk to anybody that you want to talk to about how to get out of this, and then make an educated decision and be proactive. But don't ignore it. It's not going to go away.
I'm trying not to.
You are so proactive. You're so tough on yourself, and you're such a good client.
Well, and I'm very grateful that I have you to help me, because a lot of times, I like I said, I'd be in the weeds if I didn't have someone like you to keep me on the straight and narrow, which is one of the reasons why I love doing this show, because it's good information and people need to have it. And just, you may never be able to prepare for something like this, but being forewarned is forearmed, I guess. Does that make any sense?
It is. And I think, you said yourself, you need to be not stressed. So anything we can do to eliminate that barrier, that financial barrier, and take some stress off of you is a good thing.
I think so too.
So I'll give you the last word on that, I guess.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for doing this. And as always, until our next chat, keep it positive.
There's There's a better life if I could be debt free, but all my money is a mystery. I was feeling overwhelmed and it was wearing thin when I knocked on the door and heard the doctor's in. Oh, the doctor's in, the doctor's in. She got the right prescription to help you win. Oh, the doctor's in, the money doctor's in.